The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 34th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar will be available on makara.us under the subheadings shown here. The Secret Doctrine, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, and Sacred Geometry webinar series are also now available on YouTube. We'll start by checking in on HPB's travels in India, as described in old diary leaves. Last month, we read about the founding of the Indian headquarters of the Theosophical Society at Adyar. This month finds our duo on the west coast of India in Baroda, at the court of His Highness Gaikwar of Baroda. So I'll have three readers for this, if we could.
Okay,
You could just assign them, as we need them.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I was going to go with, oops.
However you like to.
I did the wrong one. I was going to go with Carrie and then Michael and then Lynn. Okay, so.
That sounds good.
Carrie, please start.
The Royal Court at Baroda, 19th century. So he, the assistant Diwan to His Highness Gaikwar of Baroda, got the proofs withheld from the Diwan Sahib. It happened in this way, as I now recollect it. I had been out to see the Gaikwar, and on my return found Kirtain and Gadgil standing at the threshold of HPB's open door, while she was in the middle of the room with her back towards us. Our two friends told me not to step inside, as Madam B was doing a phenomenon and had just turned them out on the veranda where I found them. The next minute she came towards us and, taking a sheet of paper from the table, excuse me, told the gentleman to mark it for identification. Receiving it back, she said, "Now turn me in the direction of his residence." They did so. She then laid the paper between her palms, held horizontally, remained quiet a moment, then held it towards us and went and sat down. Cries of amazement broke from the two Debaris on seeing on the just before clean sheet of paper a letter addressed to me in the handwriting and bearing the signature of the then British resident at that court.
Who's up next?
It was the most peculiar small calligraphy, and the signature more like a tiny tangle of twine than a man's name. They then told me their story. It seems that they were asking HPB to explain the scientific rationale of the process of precipitating upon paper, cloth, or any other surface, a picture or writing, then invisible to the onlooker, and without the help of ink, paints, pencils, or other mechanical agents. She told them just what I have explained in my first volume of these old diary leaves, in connection with her New York precipitations of the yogis and M.A. Oxen's portraits, the writing of the latter, and other phenomena. She explained that inasmuch as the images of all objects and incidents are stored in the astral light, it did not require that she should have seen the person or known the writing, the image of which she wished to precipitate. She had only to be put on the trace and could find and see them for herself, and then objectivate them. They urgently begged her to do the thing for them. "Well then," she finally said, "tell me the name of some man or woman most unfriendly to the Theosophical Society, one whom neither Olcott nor I could ever have known."
Okay, Lynn, you're up.
At once, they mentioned the British resident who held us and our society in a special hatred, who never missed the chance of saying unkind things of us, and who had prevented the Gak War from inviting HPB and myself to his enthronement, as he had otherwise intended, on the suggestion of Judge Gadgil. They thought this a poser. That it was not, the sequel proved. I thought they would explode with laughter when they read the contents of the note. It was addressed to my dear old Colonel Olcott, begged my pardon for the malicious things he had said against us, asked me to enter him as a subscriber to our world-renowned magazine, The Theosophist, and said he wished to become a member of the Theosophical Society. It was signed yours sincerely, and with his name. She had never seen a line of the gentleman's writing, nor his signature, never met him in the flesh, and the note was precipitated on that sheet of paper held between her hands, as she stood in the middle of the room in broad daylight with us three witnesses looking on.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. So this is peculiarly different than the precipitations that we've read about before. Clearly, this British resident who, had, quote, an especial hatred, right, for the society, this wasn't his content. In some intuitive way, HPB wrote a joke letter, right? Because he's saying, "My dear Colonel Olcott," and begged his pardon for malicious things. Obviously, that wasn't coming from him, and yet was able to do this joke letter in the handwriting of this British resident. It's really an extraordinary thing. Also, there's something that escaped my notice at first, but on rereading, I found, you'll see that on the third line down, it says, standing at the thread of HPB O''S. And I think what we've come across here for those who are a fan of HPB, on a personal level, not just her writings, I think we have a nickname here. I think Olcott called her HPBO. So, inquiring minds want to know. Okay, so that's this week's reading. We'll begin today by rereading verse 4 of stanza 4. So could we get a reader for changing gears here very suddenly for this fourth verse of the fourth stanza?
Lorraine, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Yes. This was the army of the voice, the divine septenary. The sparks of the seven are subject to and the servants of the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh of the seven. These sparks are called spheres, triangles, cubes, lines, and modelers, for thus stands the eternal Nidana.
Okay, thank you, Lorraine. So last month we finished our survey of HPB's commentary on verse 4 with a discussion on the rotation of the planets, how they might have begun rotating. After considering modern theories on this subject, we cited the occult cause in this rotation, quote, when heat caused by the descent of flame, of course, this is a primordial flame. Whenever you see that kind of capital, you're talking extreme levels of causality. When heat caused by the descent of flame into primordial matter causes its particles to move, which motion becomes whirlwind. The term whirlwind takes us back to the footnote at the end of the verse itself. You see up there in the blue. Referencing the oi ha hu, the permutation of oi a o hu. So could we get somebody to reread the footnote at the bottom of the page?
I'll do it. The literal signification of the word is among the Eastern occultists of the North, a circular wind, whirlwind. But in this instance, it is a term to denote the ceaseless and eternal cosmic motion, or rather the force that moves it, which force is tacitly accepted as the deity, but never named. It is the eternal Karana, the ever-acting cause.
Karana means basically mental causality. So that which is called motion, the breath, and universal mind, which causes the rotation of the planets, are the, quote, permutations of Oiaohu, the younger, the original 7-in-1 logos that we read about in the last stanza, whose cosmic counterpart is the third logos, if we look at him as a systemic God. We know from decay that the planets are centers in the body of the logos. It seems likely that the physical rotation of the planets is also related to the spinning of the chakras in the etheric body of the solar logos. If we had cosmic etheric vision, maybe we'd see this multi-dimensional turning. Any thoughts on questions on what has come so far? Okay. Having considered HPB's commentary, let's
Yes.
take a look. Yeah.
Oops. Yvonne, you had your hand up there for a minute. Did you? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So the 7 planets, they're the chakras that are rotating in the body solar logos, the planets are. So the faster their speed of evolution, their higher their consciousness or their what their placement is that true? So the one that's speeding the fastest is the most highly evolved?
I would, I can't say absolutely that's correct, but I would say yes. If we use as above, so below, it certainly is true in our own bodies, right? That as we move up into consciousness, the etheric centers are moving more quickly, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, you have to remember, though, that these are, they would relate to the consciousness of the solar logos as it is demonstrated or played out through the 7 sacred planets, because after all, these are chakras in the solar logos. So it would be demonstrative of his consciousness or its consciousness, right? Okay. So it seems to me that, any other questions before we go on? Okay. It seems to me that the subject of the first phrase in verse 4, this was the army of the voice, references all the elements described in the last half of verse 3. The essences, flames, elements, builders, etc. All those are the army of the voice. I'm basing this on the fact that the first half of verse 3 is a description of the diameter, which in addition to being the symbol for the second logos, is also the super rational function pi, by which the third logos creates, involutionally realized by the army of the voice. In other words, it becomes the method by which the third logos is able to create. The next phrase, the divine mother of the 7, was in the Würzburg manuscript, the first version of the Secret Doctrine, the divine septenary, which to my mind makes more sense, especially in light of the sentence that follows. The sparks of the 7 are subject to, and the servants of the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and the 7th of the 7. Now, the sparks were introduced in verse 3 as one of the emanations of the, quote, divine man, also called the macroprosopos, whose counterpart on our planet is the Manu. It's the architect of the physical aspect. Let's take a look at the philosophical. Yes.
Sorry. Chris says, could you please repeat what you said about pi?
Oh, sure. Let me see. Go back. Okay. Pi is what I call, it's my phrase, a super-rational function. Math calls it irrational, but I think it's a question of perspective. If it's irrational from a personality point of view or a physical plane perspective, it's super-rational from the perspective of the higher realms, right? And it's through the use of pi that the third logos creates, which is involutionally realized by the Army of the Voice. That is to say, the Army of the Voice carries out the creative aspect of the third logos by means of the law of nature, which is, you could say, one with or controlled by this super-rational function that we call pi, which is 3.1415. Now, I'm going to be speaking to this to much more extent when we get into the last part of the verse, which describes elements of pi. So hang in there. Okay, so could we get a reader for this Theosophical Glossary entry on the spark?
Sure. Chris, can you read that for us, please?
A scintilla or atom of fire, spark. Fire in its septenary or denary, tenfold, forms exist on all planes so that we hear of sparks in various senses. Atman is a homogeneous divine spark, which radiates in millions of rays in their aggregate producing the primeval seven. The same idea in more mechanical form is found in Lucretius, who says that all fires comes from one scintilla, that which shines or quivers with light. Sparks may be worlds, monads, or even atoms, though the word usually means the jiva within the atom. The divine spark hangs from the flame by the finest thread of Bohat and journeys through the seven worlds of Maya, passing upwards in its evolutionary course through the animate kingdoms. In man, it is the monad in conjunction with the aroma of manas and is called a jiva. It is that which remains from each personality and hangs by a thread from Atman. The personalities are like sparks that dance on moonlit waves, fleeting reflections of their spiritual prototype. With the Hebrews, the Elohim, sparks and cherubs, are the devas and fires and flames, and the rishis, the rudras, and the 49 agnis or fires. In the Chaldean book of Numbers, the worker's hammer strikes sparks from the flint, space, which become worlds. The sparks are the seven wicks of the divine flame. The terrestrial, creative, and generative fire are created by friction, and this is the analog of the celestial fire latent in the union of Buddhi and Manas.
Thank you. Nicely read. It was like you were reading a Rumi poem, and there are elements to this glossary entry that are like that. It really waxes poetic. I love the line, in man it is the monad in conjunction with the aroma of manas and is called jiva. It's quite beautiful. So the sparks, who are the jivas within worlds, monads, and even atoms of substance, are subject to and the servants of each of the seven divine emanations. The book Transactions of the Blavatsky Lodge is a transcript of questions by students and answers by HPB on the first four stanzas of the SD. Referencing verse 4, a student asked, "What is the meaning of the sentence beginning, the sparks of the seven, etc.?" In other words, right where we are. HPB answered, "The sparks mean the rays as well to the lower intelligence as to the human sparks or monads. It relates to the circle and the digits and is equivalent to saying that the figures 3, 1, 4, 1, 5 are all subject to the circumference and diameter of the circle. We'll take a closer look at this subject in a moment. I'm not sure that that student felt answered with that. It's a very esoteric answer. All right. Okay, next. What or who are these 7 emanations? And why does the verse articulate them individually? To go to all that trouble to say, the second, third, fourth. Cosmically, they are the 7 spirits before the throne of God. Systemically, as above, so below, they are the 7 ray lords of our system. A couple of ideas come to mind about why the sparks are subject to the 7 and why each of the 7 is articulated separately in the verse. In our solar system, each ray lord attracts to itself its own human and deva kingdoms that are subject to that ray lord. But also each of the 7 chains of each scheme is influenced by one of these ray lords. Thus we have, for example, the Venus chain, the Mercury chain, etc., of the Earth scheme. Furthermore, within each chain, we have 7 globes, each influenced by and named after each of the 7 ray lords. So as a kingdom, we are subject to and the servants of our own planetary logos, while at the same time being cyclically subject to the influence of each of the ray lords. Also, our astrological charts are largely influenced by the rays of the constellations and ruling planets. Finally, each initiation is influenced by a combination of energies from the ray lords. One of the best examples of chain and globe influence that I've run across is given in Esoteric Astrology by Alice Bailey concerning the influence of Venus. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
He knows that this was brought about by the coming in bodily presence of certain great entities, and he has learned that these entities came from the Venusian chain, that they achieved the necessary juncture, undertook the government of the planet, founded the occult hierarchy, and that, though some remain with the chain, the remainder have returned to their originating source. This in many ways sums up the totality of the present knowledge. Let us briefly enlarge upon it, correct certain erroneous interpretations, and ascertain 1 or 2 new facts. We might tabulate these as follows. First, it should be borne in mind that by the occult student that A, this advent signalized the taking of a physical vehicle by the planetary logos and was literally the coming of the avatar. B, this advent was brought about by a definite systemic alignment which involved the Venus scheme of the system, the Venus chain of the Earth scheme, the Venus globe of the Earth chain. C, that the planetary logos did not come from the Venus scheme, but from the Venus chain of his own scheme, the Earth scheme. Owing to systemic alignment, logoic kundalini could flow through a certain triangle of which 2 points were Venus and the Earth. This caused an acceleration of vibration and enabled the heavenly man of our scheme to take a minor initiation and to set about his preparations for a major initiation.
Thanks, Michael. So any thoughts or questions about this idea? I just put this out to illustrate the deep interpenetration of the ray lord influence throughout the solar system. We could hypothesize that the Earth scheme's logos also has influence in other schemes. You know, we know this just by the fact that it's part of different triangles. So there's a complete interpenetration of influence, you could say, to which we are, you know, subject, right? We are subject to and the servants of these energies, right? Okay. On to the next phrase. These sparks are called, let's see, here we go. These sparks are called the spheres, triangles, cubes, lines, and modelers. Has a few possible meanings. First, the numbers associated with these geometrical figures are, again, the numbers found in the 3.1415 of pi. Provided we allow both the spheres and the line to represent different stages of the number 1. I'm hypothesizing that the modelers are represented by the number 5 because the creative or modeling function of phi associated with the number 5 is universally found in all creation, from galaxies to human beings. You may know this by the term the golden mean, and you can find it in proportions of, you know, shells, animals, human beings, galaxies, sunflowers. It's everywhere. It's also possible that the 5 geometries given, the sphere, line, triangle, cube, and modelers, are related to the planes on which they, as sparks, might be drawn to manifest. The triangles, cubes, and modelers obviously relating to the Atmic, or 3rd, Buddhic, 4th, and Manasic, 5th planes. With the 2 phases of oneness, the spheres and lines, finding their places on the logoic and monadic planes. This is just an hypothesis, of course, but this idea has some correspondence to the hypothesis that I introduced in our last session together that correlates the essences, flames, builders, elements, and numbers, again, to the 31415 of pi. In fact, the order as originally listed in verse 3 starts with essences and flames, possibly suggesting that they sequentially manifest on the 2 highest subplanes. This is followed by a description of the 2 states, arupa and rupa, that might apply to the 5 geometric categories. The formless arupa to the spherical essences and linear flames, and the form-bearing rupa to the triangles, cubes, and modelers. This hypothesis can also be applied on cosmic levels. Any thoughts or questions about any of this? Any ideas? Could you help me refine this theory? I see one hand.
Yes, Martha, go ahead. Oops, wait a minute, I think. There you go, you're good.
The word modelers is interesting because it suggests a shape maker.
Yeah.
Could you comment on that, please? Thank you.
Well, yeah, it does. And we could see it either as the entity or group of entities, right, which would certainly be Davic, and probably Davic lords, who then have the elemental kingdoms to manipulate into the form aspect, right? You could also see it as, you know, as I do here, as the nature of that which controls that modeling function, which I'm hypothesizing is phi, which is, you know, this golden mean that we find throughout creation. So, you know, you could say that these great Deva lords using phi, which is completely articulated through the number 5. I mean, if you, for instance, put up a 5-pointed star, every aspect of that 5-pointed star is defined by the golden mean, right? So if you have these Deva lords who are modelers using phi, through the agency of the lesser devas and the elemental kingdom to actually create the form aspect, right? So you begin to see how these, this would be an incredible study to try to determine the interrelation between phi and the numbers as they are described. Let's see, here's the one with the actual phi written out there in the middle. To try to determine the interrelation, like why 3 first, why 1, 4, 1, 5, why that order? Well, we get it that 5 is last because that would be the final stage, the modeling stage, but why the triangles first? If indeed, because this is my hypothesis, the triangle is related to 3. Well, we know it is, but does that also represent the builders? These are just ideas at this point, It's interesting too to me that this 31415 also relates to so many Sanskrit terms that have A, which is 1, the first letter, interpenetrating all the other letters of the word. Like, for instance, anhata means heart, right? A-N-A-H-A-T-A, right? 31415. So there's something like deity interpenetrating the substantive world in this, but it's very abstract, It's a kind of mixing of the arupa and the rupa. And if you do take out the ones, what do you have left? 3, 4, 5, which is, those architects using the elements in this functionality of modeling. These are just ideas, right? You're not going to read this in the.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
What would you say? Provocative. Really great.
Yeah, it's like food for further study, you might say. Okay, anyone else?
Chris says you need to watch Darren Aronofsky's film Pi.
Oh, yeah, okay. Aronofsky, huh? Okay. I'm sure a Google search will bring that up. Thank you.
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky, it's an older film, but it's very deep, and he begins to explore with the mathematician. It's a storyline, but I'm telling you, he has investigated the connection between the numbers and the creation. And his main character explores this and the connection to the golden mean and pi. And it's an amazing film that you need to see several times just to take it in. It's amazing.
Yeah, great. No, that's right down my alley. I'll definitely.
Yeah,
watch.
Great.
Yeah, this kind of thing.
His famous, general population, Black Swan, he did. That won accolades more recently and more general public type of thing. But this deep exploration, he especially goes into the connection with the Hebrew letters as numbers and the whole creation process, how it's involved. Very fascinating. You'll love it, Francis.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, what we're looking at here is it's easy to get, down in the trees of the forest and forget what we're actually exploring. This is the relationship between the noumenal unseen realm, let's see, let's get back to the darkness, the boundless, the no number, right? It's the relationship of that, which is symbolized by the circle and all manifestation. So you could say that in that relationship, pi demonstrates. You could say that pi is a demonstration of that relationship. In other words, it's not just a circle and then the line, and then the line is demonstrating through these numbers. It's the relationship of the unseen or the boundless with the bounded, you could say, or that very first stage of becoming, called in theosophy the second logos, right? So, from another point of view, you could say it's a relationship between the first and second logos that creates the third logos, right? Or that allows for the third logos to function, through the army of the voice and thus create. Okay. All right. So, so next we have "for thus stands the eternal Nidana." Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on Nidana. Could we get a reader, please?
Yep. Yvonne, can you read that for us, please? Sorry. There.
Nidana, Sanskrit from ni down into plus the verbal root da, to bind. That which binds to earth or to existence, philosophically speaking, originally meaning bond, rope, halter, that which binds. From this arose the implication of binding cause or bonds of causation, and hence in Buddhist philosophy it signifies cause of existence, the concatenation of cause and effect. Nidana is also a title of Brahma, considered as the first cause, being the cosmic living aggregate of vital bonds forming the universe into an organic whole, reproduced through its own internal energies from the preceding Manvantara.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So do you see how this term, this concept, is most relevant to this idea of the cosmic living aggregate of vital bonds forming the universe into an organic whole, right? It's that which links, bonds, connects the above to the below, you could say. And that linking quality itself as a function is called Nidana. An aggregate of 7 unified by their vital inner relationship. So the final words of verse 4 are the oi ha hu, the permutation of oi a o hu. The simple meaning of the word permutation is variation. The formal meaning of the word is the arrangement, especially in linear order, of a set of functions or activities. In the footnotes we looked at the beginning of this session, we learned that the oi ha hu specifically refers to the whirlwind aspect of form building, quote, a circular wind, the ceaseless and eternal cosmic motion. Later footnote gets more specific. It is when heat caused by the descent of flame into primordial matter causes its particles to move, which motion becomes the whirlwind. And that parenthetically leads to the rotation of the planets. The difference between oya-ohu and oi-ha-hu is that the term oya-ohu references deity, and with it the causal, quote, force that moves, whereas oi-ha-hu references a permutation of oya-ohu, specifically the descent of flame into primordial matter.
Francis?
Yeah.
You have a hand up.
Okay.
Ishtar, go ahead. There you go.
Thank you. Francis, very interesting. Nidana, is that an aspect of faux heart, or is that like a co-worker with faux heart?
It would be looking at the force from another perspective, because faux heart also binds spirit to matter, right? Mm-hmm. And it's an entire realm of causal aspects, the photic realm. it, because it exists, it demonstrates differently on every level. My guess is Nidana does as well, demonstrate differently. For instance, something like gravity may ultimately be a function of Nidana.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
hypothesizing, but yeah.
So it's like an archetypal frame for Fohat that can be different on different levels.
Yeah, you could say that. Of course, Fohat itself is archetypal. It's the first energy. It is the energy of electricity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't really, I can hypothesize, but I don't know any more about Nidana that could specifically delineate it from, the force of Fohat. But I think just by the fact of what they both do, that they're deeply interrelated.
Right. Could we actually say they're all aspects of Brahma, because there's quite a few different names there, isn't there?
Yeah, oh yeah, they're all aspects of Brahma. There's no question. Until when Brahma is one number, right?
Yeah.
And before it issues forth, either as 7 or as 10, depending on how you look at it.
Yes.
It contains as potential the demonstrating potency of Fohat, right? And you could say that after it happens, the Nidana is demonstrated. But just where one begins and the other ends, I can't say, for sure.
Fabulous. Thank you for explaining that.
Okay, let's see where we are. All right. We talked about the difference between Oiaohu, one referencing deity, the other referencing the force that moves. Okay. Yeah, there's no other references in the Secret Doctrine to the term Oiahu. So we're left, to just try to extrapolate what we can from this one reference and the footnote that describes the Oiahu as the permutation of Oiaohu. Permutation mean, a demonstration through sequential law. Okay. Let's see where we are. So at any rate, we're just getting started with our study of Oiaohu. In the next verse, we'll be taking a much closer look. Thoughts or questions on anything pertaining to verse 4? It's a huge subject, right? And it's one aspect of this septenary, which is being discussed all through stanza 4. Alrighty then. Verse 4 bridges to verse 5 by means of its last sentence. Could we get a reader for the part that's in dark print?
Yes, Ishtar, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, thank you. The Oiahu, which is
actually, 5. I'm going to correct you because I think it's important that we say it right. Oiaohu.
O-E-O-O, which is dark.
Okay, now, let me go back a second.
Yep.
Back some pages, 30 pages ago, we had this quote about Oiaohu. According to the method of pronunciation, the name may be given as 1, 3, or even 7 syllables by adding an E after the letter O. So, Oiaohu just gives you 5, which is not even mentioned here. You know, how do
Lovely.
you say this as one syllable? God knows. Or three? Well, ra, o, who knows? Or
Gotcha.
seven, it's, you know, she says by adding an E, so it might be O-E, A-O, ho, O-E or something. So we're left, and of course, it's going to be a hidden thing because it's a word of extreme power, right? You know, so it's when you know how to pronounce this, you'll be well along. So, okay, with that preamble, go ahead.
Okay. The O-E-R-O-Hu, which is 5, darkness, the boundless or the no number. Adi, Nidana, Svibat, Bhavat. The Adi Sanat, the number for he, is 1. 2. The voice of the Lord, Svabhavat, the numbers for he is 1 and 9. 3. The formless square. And these 3 enclosed within the circle are the sacred 4, and the 10 are the Arupa universe. Then come the sons, the 7 fighters, the eighth left out, and his breath, which is the light maker.
Thank you, Ishta. So let's take a look at the HP commentary on verse 5. We'll start with the footnote because it references a line in the verse itself. It's there at the end of Roman numeral 2 of the verse in bold. For he is 1 and 9. The he, I went back and forth. The he being Svabhavat, I finally decided, but it's also because Oeaohu is all of these things. The he also is Oeaohu. So, could we get a reader for the footnote?
Martha, you're self-muted. Can you read that for us, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Which makes 10, or the perfect number applied to the Creator, the name given to the totality of the creators, blended by the monotheists into one, as the Elohim, Adam, Kadmon, or Sephirah, the crown, are the andogene synthesis of the 10 Sephiroth, who stand for the symbol of the manifested universe in the popularized Kabbalah. The esoteric Kabbalists, however, following the Eastern occultists, divide the upper Sephirothal triangle from the rest, or Sephira, Kokma, and Bina, which leaves 7 Sephiroth. As for Svabhavat, the Orientalists explain the term as meaning the universal plastic matter diffused through space, with perhaps half an eye to the ether of science, but the occultists identify it with Father Mother on the mystic plane, Vita Supra.
Thoughts or questions about this footnote? Vita Supra is a term used to refer a reader to an earlier cited authority. So why do we have here 10 as a sum total instead of 7? The short answer is that the 10 is the more primordial of the two numbers, consisting of the 1 of the diameter and the 0 of the circle, as described by HPV earlier in the Secret Doctrine. Can we get a reader for this excerpt back on page 37?
Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Starting at the top.
Starting at the top.
Yeah. He, Ralston Skinner, in Source of Measures, shows these 10 Sephiroth for all the 10 numbers in the following diagram. Shall I read the diagram?
No, you don't need to. I think we'll all see that. Just go into wherein.
Wherein the circle is the north, Its vertical diameter line is the first or primal one, the word or logos, from which springs the series of the other numbers up to 9, the limit of the digits. The 10 is the first divine manifestation containing every possible power of exact expression of proportion.
Thank you. So any questions about this idea of 10ness? You see that the 1 is the vertical diameter here, right? Usually seen horizontally, but here described vertically. And then that within that combination becomes all potential diversity, but just as potential. And that's what's being described by these numbers, right? Okay. Next. The phrase applied to the creator, the name given to the totality of the creators, blended by the monotheist into one as the Elohim, Adam, Kadmon. Remember the numbers, and numbered that we looked at in a couple of webinars ago? Well, the creators here described are the numbers or creative agency, the 2 through 9. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on Adam Kadmon. Could we get a reader, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Before I read, Francis, I wonder if you could go back to the previous,
Sure.
the previous slide, or the one before that. I just noticed that the opposites add up to 11, which takes us beyond 10. The 2, the 9, the 3, the 8, 4, 7,
Yes, indeed, they do.
5, 6. Yeah, it's curious.
Yeah. What do you make of that?
They're
How would you
not,
interpret?
they're not the opposites. They're adjacent, but 2
Yes.
and
Yeah.
6 would be the opposite. 5 and
No,
9.
that's what I mean. Is
Yeah, they're in
Good
line with
correction.
each other. Yeah.
Good correction. Yeah. Yeah. So go
it
ahead.
just takes us beyond the 10. That's all I just noticed.
Yeah, it's interesting. 11 is, a fascinating number in so many ways, but it's the new realm of one, right? So in 10, there is a fundamental unity. There is all possibility within the realm of manifestation. So that's said and done. When you go to 11, you're articulating another system within the realm of that manifested diversity, right? So now you've stepped forward, and it's the most fundamental number. It's the one of one, right? So it's a way of describing, for instance, the relationship between soul and monad, the one of one. It's realm to realm. But that's I'm glad you pointed this out about the opposites, because you could say that this new iteration, this new realm, which is characterized by 11ness, can be described in these 1, 2, 3, 4 ways, right? Right, the 5, and the 6, the 4, and the 7. Each of them is descriptive of that realm. It's great bit of to turn these numbers into their relevant philosophical meaning. It would be quite an exercise.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that.
Now, before I go to my reading, the next slide. So, if you could go to the next slide. I seem to remember the one before, about Oeahu. I seem to remember that all these letters have got to be pronounced separately. So we keep saying who, but it's actually H-O-O. It's O-A-R-O, H-O-O.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It's only that you said we're coming to it. It's very difficult to pronounce, but it actually, the 7 comes out that way. O-A-R-O, I can't do it even.
Yeah. No, and also, you know, this is translated from the Censor. Now, it's translated by a master of wisdom, so it's relevant and it's powerful. But it's in its pronunciation. In other words, there's no right way to pronounce this. Every form of pronunciation of these 7 vowels will lead to a different magical result, you could say, in the use of white magic, right? So, and I think in that you would have such things as emphasis, you know, the vowel that's held longest, you know, and who knows what H. It's like a open breath, you know. It's not clicked off.
Yeah.
So you have, you know, O E A, or is it A? O E A O O O. We don't know. You know, it's going to be a secret. Obviously, it would have to be, right? But we can explore the fact of the potency, you know, without knowing the potencies themselves.
So we better stick to O-A-R-O, O-A-R-O-O.
Yeah. No, you know, while you're reading, if you want, you can go A-O-O if you want.
Yeah,
you know.
it's
the most obvious. It's the most obvious way to say the word. But, you know, she says this is also one syllable. What would that look like?
Yeah.
You know, gosh knows. You know, or 3, which can be imagined. You can imagine the O, E, and A being one sound, you know, and then the central O being another sound, and then the last 3 being a third sound. You know, that's imaginable. Thanks, Carrie.
So I read now.
Yeah, would you please?
Adam Kadmon, Hebrew. Adam, mankind, plus Kadmon, to be before, precede. Primordial man, Adam Primus. In the Kabbalah, macrocosmic man in contrast to the earthly Adam, the microcosm. Often called the heavenly man because symbolically he is the Sephirothal tree of life. Each of the Sephiroth having its correspondence with a part of the body, the head being in the Keter, crown, and the feet standing for Malkuth, kingdom. Adam Kadmon corresponds mystically to the Hindu Purusha. Both are generalizing terms used to represent the cosmic logos or hierarch of their respective hierarchies. Blavatsky compares Adam Kadmon to the first Manu, Svayambhuva, the synthesis of the 14 Manus, also to the Greek Prometheus and the divine Pimander of the Hermetica. The power of thought divine in its most spiritual aspect.
And that last is from Isis Unveiled, another great book. Here's a similar illustration. We're not going to get into all that these imply, but the fact that the tree of life, which is made up of 10 Sephiroth, are connected to this concept of the Manu, or the Adam Kadmon, also called the macroprosopis, is important to know. You know, they're one. So this is all this androgyne synthesis of the 10 Sephiroth, right? So the the synthesis is demonstrable as an androgyne synthesis. Okay. As Father Mother, Svabhavat, the quote, self-existent one, is identified with the number 10 because it develops from within outwardly, from 1 through 9 to the totality by means of the diameter, the 1 in relation to the 0. Okay, let's take a look at HPB's commentary on the A section of verse 5, which references Roman numeral 1, the Adisanat, the number, for he is 1. Could we get a reader for this first paragraph?
Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Adi Sanat, translated literally, is the first or primeval ancient, which name identifies the Kabbalistic Ancient of Days and the holy aged of Sephira and Adam Kadmon, with Brahma, the creator, called also Sanat among his other names and titles. Sabbahat is the mystic essence, the plastic root of physical nature. Numbers, when manifested, the number in its unity of substance on the highest plane. The name is of Buddhist use and a synonym for the fourfold anima mundi, the Kabbalistic archetypal world, from whence proceed the creative, formative, and the material worlds, the centineli or sparks, the various other worlds contained in the last 3. The worlds are all subject to rulers or regents, rishis and pitris with the Hindus, angels with the Jews and Christians, gods with the ancients in general.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph?
Yeah, we have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Chris says, what about the 8th left out? What do you mean,
We are
Chris?
going to be exploring this in depth.
Oh.
I'll just say this much. It's the Son himself, and he's, quote, left out because he precedes the 7 planets. And there's a whole allegory written about it, which we'll be getting to and exploring. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? So this
Yes.
sentence?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Trudy's got her hand up. Trudy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Ancient of Days is Sanat Kumara.
Right. It is indeed. Yeah. And so is Melchizedek is often associated with him. Right. So you have a lot of different associations here. In fact, I have a little chart right here that, and that bottom one, which he says also Sanat, you could say is Sunat Kumara. That would be the complete name, right? Because the Kumaras who come from Capricorn, the constellation, are individually named, in their first names. And Sanat is one of the Kumaras. Yeah, thanks for that. So let's see. Yeah, the sentence elucidates the identities and or agencies of Oiaohu. Here's a list extracted from just this first sentence, right, which I reproduced above there. This sentence reminds us that Svabhavat is both number and numbers, the 2 aspects of substance on the highest substantive plane, the 1 and 9. Right? As to the archetypal world, let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary on Anima Mundi. Could we get a reader for this?
Yes, Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Anima Mundi is Latin word soul, world mother, divine, spiritual, astral, physical, source of emanation.
Sorry. Is it back for you?
Yeah,
Go
it's
ahead.
go back. Yeah. The cosmic, generative, and animating principle of all beings, the creative third logos in its female aspect. In its highest and intermediate portions, it corresponds to the Alaya of Northern Buddhism and hence to Akasa, identified variously with Isis, Sephira, Sophia, the Holy Ghost, Mahat, Mulaprakriti, etc., but used in the hazy and often materialistic sense, so that it cannot be accurately regarded as a synonym for any one of these. It is in a sense the seven-skinned mother of the stanzas in the Secret Doctrine, the essence of seven planes of science, sentience, consciousness, and differentiation, moral and physical. In its highest aspect, it is nirvana. In its lowest astral light, it was feminine with the Gnostics, the early Christians, and the Nazarenes, bisexual with other sects, who considered it only in its four lower planes of igneous, ethereal nature in the objective world of form, and then ether, and divine and spiritual in its three higher planes. When it is said that every human soul was born by detaching itself from the anima mundi, it means esoterically that our higher egos are of the essence identified with it, which is a radiation of the ever unknown universal absolute. Theosophically, anima mundi may be regarded as a synonym of different other words rather than as indicative of any definite entity or principle apart from others. The higher human egos, or manasaputras, are essentially identical with the higher portions of anima mundi, and similarly the various life atoms in the lower spheres may be considered as in essence identical with the lower portions of the anima mundi. It is in short the life consciousness essence of the universe, from the divine to the physical.
Thank you. Okay, so the fourfold anima mundi described in the text is, quote, the divine, spiritual, astral, physical source of emanations, which we're told is svabhava. The, quote, creative, formative, and material worlds represent three sequentially involutional stages, bridging the gap between the numbers and the numbered, with numbers being creative and formative, and the material worlds being the numbered. A spark is an indwelling jiva, the spiritual essence of a world, person, or atom of substance, which can exist, we're being told here, on creative, formative, and or material levels. Can we get a reader for this quote from the Peruker?
Yvonne,
read it.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, the scintillas are the souls, and these souls appear in the threefold form of monads, units, atoms, and gods, according to our teaching. Every atom becomes a visible complex unit, a molecule, and once attracted into the sphere of terrestrial activity, the monadic essence, passing through the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms, becomes man. From Fundamentals of Esoteric Philosophy, page 40.
Thank you. So we may be tempted to equate the term worlds, as used here, with planets, but it has much broader implications. And I'd like to read this because it has some really good stuff in it around the nature of this way of dividing. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. World, frequently used to signify various facts of nature, a cosmic plane or subplane, a cosmic sphere, or less accurately, an entire cosmic hierarchy. Hence, it is common to speak of superior and inferior worlds, or worlds of spirit and of matter, which are not separated from each other. For the worlds of spirit, or the superior worlds, are the origins of the lower or inferior worlds, as these latter are in the course of cosmic emanation, unfolded from cosmic space. A division is generally made between the superior, arupa or formless worlds, and the inferior, rupa or form worlds, the latter situated on the lower four planes of the septenary hierarchy. These are also referred to as the noumenal and the phenomenal, unmanifested and manifested, the worlds of idea and the worlds of matter. As above, so below, states the Hermetic philosophy. This lower world is formed on its prototype, the higher world, and everything in the lower is but an image, a reflection of the higher. So R2 follow 20a. That's from OTG is the Theosophical.
Online, yeah, it's the online Theosophical Glossary, which basically is, it's Gottfried de Perucker's Theosophical Glossary on steroids. That is to say that they have continuously expanded it to include all references. It's a fabulous resource, much greater than the original printed Theosophical Glossaries, and in most, I think in all cases, includes those various glossaries, right? Okay, any questions about this? So we have worlds within worlds. You know, I actually like the term used by the Gnostics, eons or aeons, not to mean as great lengths of time, which is our normal use of it, but as what's here described as worlds, right? Specific congeries of consciousness in time and space that represent a certain level of either form-based or formless reality, right? Okay. Up next, can we get a reader for, we're moving on to the B section here.
Lorraine, can you read that for us, please?
B. This means that the boundless circle, 0, becomes a figure or number only when one of the 9 figures precedes it and thus manifests its value and potency, the word or logos in union with voice and spirit, the expression and source of consciousness, standing for the 9 figures and thus forming with the cipher the decade, which contains in itself all the universe. The triad forms within the circle the tetractys or sacred 4, the square within the circle being the most potent of all the magical figures.
Okay, thank you, Lorraine. So before we discuss this paragraph, let's take a look at the footnote, which references, quote, in union with voice and spirit. Lorraine, would you just continue reading?
Hold on a second here. There you go.
In union with the spirit and the voice, referring to the abstract thought and concrete voice, or the manifestation thereof, the effect of the cause. Adam, Kadmon, or Tetragrammaton is the logos in the Kabbalah. Therefore, this triad answers in the latter to the highest triangle of Kether, Chochmah, and Binah, the last a female potency, and at the same time the male Jehovah, as partaking of the nature of Chochmah, or the male wisdom.
Any thoughts or questions about this? Okay, now let's consider the B commentary and the footnote together. Key in this first phrase is the verb manifests, thus delineating the zero or cipher when it occurs as part of a number from the circle that stands alone, representing the unmanifest, unquantifiable, boundless potential, described in the verse as, quote, darkness, the boundless, or the no number. This, you may remember going way back, is Oyaohu, the elder. The manifested value and potency of the cipher is the spirit aspect now embodied in the word or logos, which the footnote tells us is abstract thought in union with the concrete voice, the latter being an expression of the logos or source of consciousness. The spirit aspect embodied in the logos in union with the concrete voice demonstrates in infinite variety by means of the 9 figures. This ninefold demonstration, in conjunction with the cipher, gives us Svabhavat, the decad, which, quote, contains in itself all the universe. Mostly and usually seen the universe in potentiality. In this final statement of this paragraph, HPB describes the symbol for the decad, which is a triangle within a circle. Inherent in the triangle is the tetractys, called also the Sacred Four. So, what elements make up the Sacred Four? We need go no further than our verse to find out. It is 1, Adisanat, who is Brahma, 2, the voice, 3, the formless square or primordial substance, all enclosed within, 4, the circle, the boundless realm of no number that forms the causal parameters of the manifested universe, represented by the 10, which are, quote, the arupa, subjective, formless universe. Is this starting to make sense? How the 1 and 10 embrace this in the entirety, each having its own quality. That is to say, the circle in and of itself, which is also the 0 of 10, but not until it is part of the 10, right? So you have the circle, then you have the 1, or the diameter, which is the first singularity. That's Oyaohu the younger. That's all these gods that we had a list there, right? Including maybe most recognizably Brahma, you know. And then we have the entire diversity, which is represented by, or is objectifies as a result of, pi, right? That super rational function called pi. And then that mysterious 31415, which gives us the diversity of our universe, right? And this is also represented by 9-ness, you could say, right? Under number 2 there, for he is 1 and 9. He is unity and he is the totality of diversity, right? Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Ishtar asks, the 1 or line in this circle, is the duality formed?
Yes. That's the first and fundamental duality. When you have the circle with a line. And that's the second logos. And the reason that logos is called the feminine is because from it goes forth the son, this birth, the son, who is Oyaohu the younger, or Brahma, or whoever, who then creates, right? So it's a twice removed process, right? Yes, it's the fundamental duality, circle and line. And it has a different and yet the same when you look at it as 10, the 1 and the 0, because then you have the potential of all diversity, which the second logos, or the circle with the diameter, represents, right? You could say it's 2 stages of that coming forth. Any other questions about that?
Lynn asks, why are the suns called the 7 fighters?
That's a good question. It has to do with the quality of Fohat, which is the fight to come into individualized representation, right? They're fighting against, you could say, very much like when a child is born, they fight to come into the world. They're fighting for their separative individuality, and the allegory about this describes this fight, which is basically trying to hold on to, first of all, to accrete the necessary substance to become an individuated planet, and then to hold on to it and not have it stripped off by other planets, and more importantly by the sun itself. So there may be other reasons for that, but that's what I think it is. Anything else?
No.
Okay. So next up, can we get a reader for this?
Chris, can you read that for us, please?
The one rejected is the sun of our system. The exoteric version may be found in the oldest Sanskrit scriptures, in the Rig Veda, Aditi. The boundless or infinite space translated by Mr. Max Muller, the visible infinite, visible by the naked eye, and the endless expanse beyond the earth, beyond the clouds, beyond the sky, is the equivalent of mother space, coeval with darkness. She is very properly called the mother of the gods, Deva Matri, as it is from her cosmic matrix that all the heavenly bodies of our systems were born, sun and planets. Thus she's described allegorically in this wise: the 8 suns were born from the body of Aditi. She approached the gods with 7, but cast away the 8th, Martanda, our sun. The 7 suns, called the Aditya, are cosmically or astronomically the 7 planets, and the sun, being excluded from their number, shows plainly that the Hindus may have known, and in fact knew, of a 7th planet without calling it Uranus. But esoterically and theologically, so to say, the Adityas are, in their primitive, most ancient meanings, the 8, and the 12 great gods of the Hindu pantheon.
Okay, there's a lot here. Any thoughts or questions that come up immediately? So though the first part of this verse can be interpreted either cosmically or systemically, with, quote, the one, the eighth left out, we are definitely within the bounds of our solar system. So, okay, from the top, the theme introduced by the phrase, the one rejected is the sun of our system, will be the subject of the next several paragraphs. HPB really gets into this. And he will give us the exoteric version of this teaching story in an upcoming paragraph. Next, after venting her frustration with Max Muller, he was kind of a dead letter European interpreter of these of the Vedas. So after venting her frustration with Max Muller's dead letter interpretation of space, HP gives us 5 names for the primordial divine feminine, who we're then told births the sun. So here are the 5 names. And births the sun and planets of our solar system by means of, quote, her cosmic matrix, described elsewhere in HPB's writings as the gates of woman, the female procreative principle, the womb of space, and the matrix of matter. The interesting part of the term is matrix, right? Let's look at the teaching story. 8 sons were born from the body of Aditi. She approached the gods with 7, but cast away the 8th, Martanda, our son. This is the provocative setup for the story that follows. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's entry for Aditya. So you have Aditi is the mother. Aditya is the collected name for the 7 sons. It means from Aditi, not surprisingly. So could we have, BL, you could just read that yourself if you would.
Okay. Adityas, belonging to, issuing from Aditi, unbounded expanse, sons of Aditi, space. In the Vedas, a name for the sun, also referred to variously as 5, 7, 8, and 12 in number. The 8th Aditya, Martanda, was rejected by Aditi, leaving 7 sons, each manifesting a particular solar energy.
Thank you. Okay, here are 2 medieval charts depicting the 7 planets. The sun being rejected and thus excluded from the list given in the Rig Veda implies the existence of an alternative 7th planet. The next planet beyond the orbit of Saturn is Uranus. Discovered in 1781, thus known to Blavatsky, but certainly not known in ancient Hindu society, but HPB is suggesting here was known to the writers of the Rig Veda. So let's take a look at the footnote, which references the planet Uranus. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Ishtar, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. There.
Okay, just a moment. O-E-R-O-Hu, which is 5, darkness.
Oh, hold on.
Am I reading the wrong thing?
Yeah, just go down to the very bottom there where it starts the Secret Doctrine teaches.
Oh, right, sorry. The
Right,
Secret
and
Doctrine.
this is referencing right here where it says Uranus.
Uranus.
So it's
Okay.
the footnote for that planet. Okay, go ahead.
The Secret Doctrine teaches that the sun is a central star and not a planet. Yet the ancients knew of and worshipped 7 great gods, excluding the sun and earth. Which was that mystery god they set apart? Of course, not Uranus, discovered only by Herschel in 1781. But could it not be known by another name, says the author of Maconary Occulti. Occult sciences, having discovered through astronomical calculations that the number of the planets must be 7. The ancients were led to introduce the sun into the scale of the celestial harmonies and make him occupy the vacant place. Thus, every time they perceived an influence that pertained to none of the 6 planets known, they attributed it to the sun. The error only seems important, but was not so in practical results. If the ancient astrologers replaced Uranus by the sun, which is a central star, relatively motionless, turning only on its axis and regulating time and measure, and which cannot be turned aside from its true functions. The nomenclature of the days of the week is thus faulty. The sun day ought to be Uranus day. Urani dies. Urundi adds the learned writer Ragon. Secret Doctrine 99 to 100.
Thank you. So any thoughts or questions about this footnote? Masonnerie occulte, of course, translates to occult masonry. Subtitle, Hermetic Initiation. It was written by J.M. Ragon, and unfortunately, as far as I could find, has not been translated into English. The last sentence of the footnote reminds us that the days of the week are named after the old ways of listing the 7 planets. One might argue that according to DK, the sun sometimes veils Uranus, right? So maybe Sunday is, veiled Uranus Day, and that this was known in ancient times. It's just speculation. Any thoughts or questions about this footnote? Okay. Up next, is the last sentence of the final sentence of this paragraph. But esoterically and theologically, so to say, the Adityas are, in their primitive, most ancient meanings, the 8 and the 12 great gods of the Hindu pantheon. So we have some disparity here, and they clear it up a little bit in the second half of this definition of the Adityas. Could we get a reader, please, for this?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Adityas. The Brahmanas and Puranas generally reckon 12 Adityas. In a preceding Manvantara, they were called Tushitas, but when the end of the cycle was near, they entered the womb of Aditi, that we may be born in the next Manvantara, for thereby we shall again enjoy the rank of gods. Hence, in the present 7th Manvantara, they are known as Adityas. When the Pralaya, dissolution of the world, comes, 12 suns will appear. The 12 Adityas are the 12 great gods of the Hindu pantheon. Also, the 12 signs of the zodiac, or 12 months of the year. The Adityas are the sustainers of the solar divine life, which exists in all things. And in our present Vaisvasvata Manvantara, they are the divine solar Pitris, fathers, not the lower or lunar Pitris, which incarnated in early humanity. The wise call our fathers Vesus, our paternal grandfathers Rudras, our paternal great-grandfathers Adityas.
Thanks, Michael. So any thoughts or questions about this? Kind of abstruse, but clearly the Adityas include, but are not exclusive to, our sun and planets, because you have a number of cosmic references here. What a takeaway is the Adityas are the sustainers of the solar divine life, which exists in all things. Sustainers being that Vishnu aspect that carries it forward, allowing us to participate in it, right? Okay. Yeah.
Britta has a comment here. She says, according to esoteric astrology, both the moon and sun are veiling other planets. Sorry, my asthma is kicking in. And they're not really planets, but in the Arab astrology, they're considered to be lights of the heaven. The 7 suns may relate to the 7 holy planets and the 5 unholy.
Yeah, because remember when you call something a sun, you're also pointing out its solar aspect, right? And these planets are solar in their nature. They're participating in the solar aspect. So it's not, you have to get away from this, the kind of hypnosis of physical descriptions and look at the meaning of these words in another way. And so, yeah, that's well said. And yeah, there's a number of veils that the sun and the moon participate in, various different planets, as well as you were suggesting, qualities beyond this solar system, right? So thank you for that. Okay, well, everybody pull out their party hats, because congratulations are in order. We just reached page 100 of the Secret Doctrine, first volume. Of course, the real milestone will come at the 100th webinar. Do you think you'll be around for that, BL? Well, I calculated it. Interestingly, it should happen sometime around the end of 2025. So that seems somehow appropriate.
Oh, yeah, I plan on living to be a ripe old age. The question is, will you be around?
It is, isn't it? Big question. Well, if not, I'll see. We might have to do parts of volume 2 on the others from the other side. We'll just see.
Okay, we'll be sure to give all of you the link for that, okay?
Yeah, right. I hear the internet connection is fabulous over there. Anyway, next up is, could we get a reader for this paragraph?
Okay,
Starting right here with the 7 allow.
Okay, Lynn, can you read that for us, please? Oops, I just muted you. There you go.
The 7 allow the mortals to see their dwellings, but show themselves only to the Arhats, says an old proverb. Their dwellings standing here for planets. The ancient commentary gives an allegory and explains it. 8 houses were built by Mother, 8 houses for her 8 divine sons, 4 large and 4 small ones, 8 brilliant sons according to their age and merits. Balialu, Martanda, was not satisfied, though his house was the largest. He began to work as the huge elephants do. He breathed, drew into his stomach the vital airs of his brothers. He sought to devour them. The larger 4 were far away, far on the margin of their kingdom. They were not robbed, affected, and laughed. Do your worst, sir. You cannot reach us, they said. But the smaller wept. They complained to the mother. She exiled Balialu to the center of her kingdom, from whence he could not move. Since then, he only watches and threatens. He pursues them, turning slowly around himself, they turning swiftly from him, and he following from afar the direction in which his brothers move, on the path that encircles their houses. From that day, he feeds on the sweat of the mother's body. He fills himself with her breath and refused. Therefore, she rejected him.
Thank you, Lynn. So any thoughts or questions? This is the allegory. It's very ancient. The second footnote reads, yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my impression is they were talking about the 4 large brothers, and so that has to be Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune.
Yeah, it's not something, and this is thousands of years old. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And that's one of the reasons that she's including this particular allegory, is because it clearly references what wasn't known in those days, right? At least exoterically. There's some interesting stories, like, for instance, the Dogon tribes, and which lived near the ancient Egyptians. They found out that archaeologists discovered that they knew about Sirius B. Well, you need a pretty good telescope to see Sirius B, which rotates around Sirius A, right? And yet it was illustrated by the ancients, on their in stone carvings, this star rotating around Sirius A. So there's, a lot was known by the ancients, not through direct observation, and certainly not through, traditional scientific means.
Francis?
Okay, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Martha says, is this story about the suns pointing to the need for the sun to evolve in its plane?
Let's see. I actually, I think it's mostly a blind in order to throw you off the scent of the teaching story of the creation of the eight, right? And we'll get to that. So let me come back to that, Martha, and I'll think about that as we go.
And then Robert's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this gives another take on what you mentioned earlier in terms of why the 7 sons were called the fighters. They're fighting with each other, they're fighting with the sun for survival, etc., etc.
That's right. It's exactly right. That's why we had to get to this part to understand the verse. That's exactly right. Yeah, thanks, Robert. So the second footnote, which references he following from afar the direction in which his brothers move on the path that encircles their houses, reads, the sun rotates on its axis always in the same direction in which the planets revolve in their respective orbits, right? As though it's keeping its eye on them, right? Okay. Next, the 7 allow the mortals to see their dwellings, but show themselves only to the arhats, says an old proverb. Their dwellings standing here for planets. Well, this is pretty clear. Only high initiates, which HPB calls arhats, have developed the inner vision and interconnections that allow them to experience the direct presence of a Ray Lord, right? The rest of us see only their, quote, houses, which are the planets. In the beginning of this C section, HPB tells us that the allegory we just read is an exoteric teaching story. It seems to me also a blind that turns the true relationship between the planets and the sun on its ear. We have to smile when we read that the sun is, quote, banished to the center of the solar system. That's some banishment. The blind is also completed through all the pejorative verbiage, i.e. Martanda, the other Logi called him Marty, was not satisfied, though his house was the largest. So he sought to devour them, making the inner Logi weep and the outer Logi laugh. Well, you know, this I think is to throw us off the scent of the underlying teaching. The last sentence is a further example of using negative language to create a blind. From that day, we're told, he feeds on the sweat of the mother's body. He fills himself with her breath and refuse, right? Therefore, she rejected him. Esoterically, sweat is a formative energy substance. Breath is prana. And again, according to the Theosophical Glossary, breath can denote any active emanation or vibratory sustenance. Rejection is probably used here to suggest separation from the primordial homogeneous condition of the mother. This analysis of, of this allegory only scratches the surface of the riddle, but if nothing else, it illustrates how blinds are used to both hide and at the same time reveal. It requires looking past those aspects that are meant to turn you away from the truth. Any thoughts or questions so far?
Let me see. Got a couple of them here. Ishtar says they laughed at the sun. Is this their way to say our logos is not sacred?
Maybe it's possible, in interpretation like this, you can, my tendency is to reject all this pejorative qualities because these are all astral realities, being jealous, being afraid, laughing at, and we're talking about beings at the level, of the sixth kingdom of logis who are so far beyond any kind of astral or emotional demonstration, that it becomes pure allegory. So maybe, but I don't know. I tend to reject the language that it's cast in and just look at the bare bones facts. Like who was it that pointed out that we're looking at, well, it was you, Biel, right? That you're looking at 4 great planets, which are the 4 gaseous giants, and that type of thing.
Yeah, and
that's just,
all 4 of those are sacred. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe that's the laughing going on. Okay, next up.
And then Yvonne says, "What is her refuse?"
Oh yeah, that's actually coming up in right here. It's actually the breath of the universal soul. I'm not seeing it real quick here, but it is the breath. The refuse is, she describes as the breath of the universal soul. So again, it's like he gets rejected because he breathes her refuse. But really what's happening is, by breathing the energy of the universal soul, his separation becomes from homogeneous substance becomes completed. That would be the more esoteric way of seeing this. Not necessarily the most esoteric, but at least it's a step towards that. Right. So could we get a reader for this, please?
Sure. Robert, will you read that for us, please?
Which one am I reading?
You're starting
Thus-
with thus. Yeah.
Okay. Thus the rejected son, being our son, evidently, as shown above, the sun's sons refer not only to our planets, but to the heavenly bodies in general. Himself only a reflection of the central spiritual sun, Surya is a prototype of all those bodies that evolved after him. In the Vedas, he's called Loka Haksha, the eye of the world, our planetary world, and he is one of the 3 chief deities. He is called indifferently the son of Dyaus and of Aditi, because no distinction is made with reference to or scope allowed for the esoteric meaning. Thus he is depicted as drawn by 7 horses and by 1 horse with 7 heads, the former referring to his 7 planets, the latter to their one common origin from the one cosmic element. This one element is called figuratively fire. The Vedas, Atareya Brahmana of Haug, also page 1, page I, teach that the fire verily is all the deities, Narada in Anagita.
Okay, we're going to stop there and reread this paragraph. Next time we'll start at this point. Do you want to tell us about when the next 2 webinars are?
Sure.
Yeah.
The next Secret Doctrine one is going to be September 20th. And the next STOA, Secret Teachings of All Ages, will be first. We'll have that on September 6th.
Okay, so we have a break here. We have 3 weeks until the 6th, and then 2 more weeks after that until the Secret Doctrine. So you can always remember, because it's the first and third Sundays, and you get invitations anyway. So it'll be a little bit of a break, 3 weeks until our next. It's my privilege and pleasure to host this series. I hope that you're getting something from it. I certainly am. So thanks for attending, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.